The gunshots cracked through the still desert air like thunder on a clear day, shattering the peace of Pinos Altos, New Mexico territory. Tessa Donovan ducked instinctively, her heart hammering against her ribs as bullets splintered the wooden post just inches from her face. She had only arrived in town 3 days ago to take over her late uncle's general store, and now she was caught in the middle of what appeared to be a showdown between outlaws and the law. It was 1878, and the promise of a new beginning was quickly dissolving into a nightmare. Get down. A deep voice commanded, and before Tessa could react, strong hands grabbed her waist and dragged her behind a water trough. She found herself pressed against a broad chest, staring up into the most intense blue eyes she had ever seen. "You're safe," the man whispered, his breath warm against her ear as he sheltered her body with his own. Another volley of gunfire erupted, and Tessa flinched, instinctively clutching at the stranger's worn leather vest. He smelled of horses, leather, and the open plains, an oddly comforting scent in the chaos. "Name's Vincent Quinn," he said, checking his revolver while keeping his body positioned to shield her. "Town marshal, picked a bad day to be out shopping, Miss Donovan." "Tessa Donovan," she managed, her voice steadier than she expected. "I own just inherited Donovan's general store," recognition flashed in his eyes. "Old man Donovan's niece, heard you were coming." He peered over the trough, then ducked back down as a bullet whistled overhead. "Not exactly the welcome we had planned." "Who are they?" Tessa asked, trying to see around him. "Chandler gang. Been terrorizing the territory for months. We got word they were planning to hit the bank today." He flashed her a quick, apologetic smile that transformed his weathered face. "Stay down. This'll be over soon." Vincent Quinn was not what Tessa had expected from a town marshal in a frontier mining settlement. He was younger than most lawmen she'd encountered, perhaps 30, with a face that spoke of both hardship and kindness. His dark hair fell in waves to his collar, and despite the intensity of the situation, his hands were steady as he reloaded his weapon. "When I say run, head straight for that alleyway," he instructed, nodding toward a narrow passage between the saloon and the barber shop. "Don't stop until you're inside the store. Lock the door behind you." Tessa nodded, gathering her courage. She had not traveled 2,000 miles from Boston to cower in fear. Her uncle's death had offered her an escape from a life of stifling propriety and unwanted suitors, and she wasn't about to let this be the end of her fresh start. "Ready?" Vincent asked, his eyes scanning the street. "Now." He fired 3 rapid shots, providing cover as Tessa hitched up her skirts and ran. Her heart pounded in her ears, drowning out everything except the thundering of her boots on the dusty road. She had nearly reached the alleyway when a searing pain tore through her upper arm. The impact knocked her sideways, but before she could fall, Vincent was there, catching her and pulling her into the shadowy passage. "You're hit," he said, his voice tight with concern as he examined her arm. Blood was already soaking through the fabric of her sleeve. "It's just a graze, but we need to get you someplace safe to look at it properly." Tessa nodded, suddenly light-headed. The adrenaline that had propelled her forward was ebbing, replaced by a throbbing pain that radiated from her wound. Vincent kept his arm around her waist, guiding her through the back of the alley to a side entrance of her store. "Key," he prompted. With trembling fingers, Tessa retrieved the key from her pocket and handed it to him. Vincent unlocked the door and ushered her inside, locking it behind them. The familiar smell of coffee, leather, and dried goods greeted her, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Vincent led her to a chair behind the counter and helped her sit. "Do you have any clean cloths, whiskey?" "Second shelf behind the counter," she directed, pointing to where her uncle had kept a small medicinal supply. "And there's a medical kit in the back room. Uncle William was prepared for everything." Vincent retrieved the supplies and knelt before her. With gentle hands, he helped her remove her jacket, revealing the torn and bloodied sleeve of her blouse. Tessa winced as he carefully cut away the fabric to expose the wound. "You're lucky," he said, examining the injury. "Bullet just grazed you." "Going to sting like the devil when I clean it, though." Tessa set her jaw. "Do what you must, Marshal Quinn." A small smile tugged at his lips. Vincent, he corrected. After saving someone's life, I reckon we're on a first-name basis. He poured whiskey onto a clean cloth and looked up at her. Ready, she nodded, and when he pressed the cloth to her wound, Tessa bit her lip to keep from crying out. Her fingernails dug into her palm as waves of pain washed over her. You're doing fine, Vincent encouraged, his voice low and soothing as he cleaned the wound. Most men I know would be howling by now. I'm not most men, Tessa replied through gritted teeth, earning a genuine chuckle from him. No, madam, you certainly are not. He worked efficiently, applying a salve from the medical kit and then bandaging her arm. His fingers were calloused but surprisingly gentle, and despite the pain, Tessa found herself studying his face, the strong line of his jaw, the small scar that cut through his right eyebrow, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of a man who smiled often. How long have you been marshal? She asked, partly to distract herself from the pain and partly out of genuine curiosity. Going on 3 years now, he answered, securing the bandage. Came to Pinos Altos looking for silver like everyone else, found a badge instead. Gunfire continued outside, though it seemed to be moving away from the store. Vincent finished tending to her wound and moved to the window, carefully peering through the curtains. My deputies have them on the run, he said, relief evident in his voice. Should be safe soon. Tessa stood, testing her strength, and was pleased to find that while her arm throbbed painfully, she wasn't as weak as she'd feared. Thank you, she said, for saving my life out there. Vincent turned from the window, his expression softening. Just doing my job, Miss Donovan. Tessa, she corrected with a small smile. After having someone save my life and tend my wounds, I reckon we're on a first-name basis. His laugh was warm and genuine, transforming his face and making something flutter in Tessa's chest that had nothing to do with her injury. Fair enough, Tessa. He moved back to her side. You should rest. That arm's going to be sore for a few days. I can't rest. I have a store to run, she protested, gesturing to the shelves around them. I've only been open 3 days and I can't afford to close. Vincent frowned. At least let me help you clean up and get settled. The town owes you that much after the welcome you've received. Before Tessa could respond, a loud banging on the front door interrupted them. Vincent immediately pushed her behind him, drawing his revolver. Marshal, you in there. A voice called, It's my deputy, Vincent said, holstering his weapon and moving to unlock the door. A young man with sandy hair and freckles burst in, his face flushed with excitement. We got 3 of them, Marshal. Thompson and Williams are escorting them to the jail now. 2 others rode off toward the hills, but we wounded at least 1 of them. Any casualties on our side, Simmons? Vincent asked. No, sir. Old man Peterson took a bullet to his wooden leg, and Mrs. Henderson's prize rooster won't ever crow again, but no people hurt. The deputy's eyes widened when he noticed Tessa. Except, oh, madam, are you all right? Just a graze, Tessa assured him. Your marshal patched me up nicely. This is Tessa Donovan, William Donovan's niece, Vincent introduced her. She's taken over the general store. The deputy touched the brim of his hat respectfully. Madam, sorry about all this ruckus. The Chandlers don't usually come this far west. They do when the silver shipment's big enough, Vincent said grimly. Simmons, I want you to organize a patrol. Make sure they're really gone and not just regrouping. Yes, sir. The deputy nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Vincent turned back to Tessa. I should go help, but I don't feel right leaving you alone just yet. I've been alone since my parents died 10 years ago, Tessa said, straightening her shoulders despite the pain. And I managed to travel across the country by myself. I think I can handle being in my own store. Vincent studied her for a moment, then nodded. I believe you can. But still, I'd feel better if you'd let Doc Miller take a look at that arm when things settle down. I'll consider it, she conceded. Vincent moved to the door but paused with his hand on the knob. Will you be opening the store today? Tessa glanced around at the shelves of goods waiting to be sold. In a little while, yes. People will need supplies, especially after all this excitement. Then I'll stop by later to check on you, he said. And there was something in his tone that suggested it was more than just concern for a wounded citizen. After he left, Tessa sank back into her chair, her arm throbbing. The events of the morning replayed in her mind the terror of the gunfight, the safety she'd felt in Vincent's arms, the gentleness of his touch as he tended her wound. She had come to New Mexico territory seeking independence and a fresh start, not to be rescued by a handsome marshal on her first week in town. And yet, as she rose to prepare the store for opening, she couldn't help but look forward to Vincent's promised return. True to his word, Vincent returned to the general store later that afternoon. The town had calmed considerably, though there was still an undercurrent of tension as citizens discussed the morning's excitement in hushed tones on street corners and in the saloon. Tessa was helping Mrs. Peterson select fabric for a new dress when the bell above the door chimed, announcing Vincent's arrival. He'd changed his shirt and washed the dust from his face, and Tessa felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach at the sight of him. "Afternoon, Marshal," Mrs. Peterson greeted. "Heard you and the boys had quite a morning." "Yes, madam," Vincent replied, removing his hat. "But the Chandlers won't be troubling Pinos Altos again anytime soon. See that they don't. My Herbert nearly had a conniption when that bullet hit his spare leg." The elderly woman selected a bolt of blue calico and nodded to Tessa. "I'll take 5 yards of this, dear." Tessa measured and cut the fabric, wrapping it carefully despite the pain in her arm. Vincent watched her, his eyes narrowed slightly in concern. After Mrs. Peterson paid and left, Vincent approached the counter. "How's the arm?" "Sore," Tessa admitted, "but I've managed. Doc Miller is free now if you'd let me escort you over." When she hesitated, he added, "It would ease my conscience." Tessa glanced around the store. It had been a steady stream of customers all afternoon, many coming in with thinly veiled curiosity about the new shopkeeper who'd been caught in the crossfire. She was tired and her arm ached fiercely. "All right," she agreed. "Let me close up for an hour." Vincent waited patiently as she locked the cash box and put up a sign indicating she would return shortly. The afternoon sun was intense as they stepped onto the boardwalk, and Vincent offered his arm for support. Tessa hesitated only briefly before accepting it, acutely aware of his solid presence beside her. "I want to thank you properly," she said as they walked. "For saving my life this morning." Vincent shook his head. "No need for thanks, I'm just sorry you were caught in the middle of it. Not the welcome I would have wished for you." "Is it always so exciting in Pinos Altos?" A smile tugged at his lips. "Not always. We're generally a peaceful town despite being in mining country. The silver brings its share of trouble, but most days the worst crime I deal with is Toby Jenkins having too much to drink at the saloon." They reached the doctor's small office, and Vincent held the door for her. Doc Miller was a grandfatherly man with white whiskers and kind eyes who clucked disapprovingly when he unwrapped Vincent's bandaging to examine her wound. "Clean work, Marshal," he admitted, "but she'll need to keep this arm still for at least a week to avoid tearing it open again." Tessa frowned. "I can't possibly, I have a store to run." "Then you'll need help," Doc Miller said firmly, applying a fresh bandage. "No heavy lifting, no reaching high shelves, and change this dressing daily." He handed her a small jar of salve. "Apply this morning and night." Vincent, who had waited discreetly in the corner, stepped forward. "I'll make sure she has help, Doc." Tessa opened her mouth to protest, but was silenced by the determined look in Vincent's eyes. "My deputy's brother, Samuel, is looking for work," Vincent continued. "Good lad, strong back, honest as the day is long. I'll send him over tomorrow morning." "I can't afford to hire help yet," Tessa admitted, embarrassed. "The store's only just starting to turn a profit again after being closed for months." "Consider it the town's apology for your welcome," Vincent insisted. "Mayor Jenkins will cover his wages for the first month." Tessa doubted the mayor had agreed to any such thing, but before she could argue further, Doc Miller interrupted. "That's settled then. Now, Miss Donovan, take this." He handed her a small bottle. "Laudanum. For the pain if it gets too bad, just a few drops in water." Outside the doctor's office, Tessa turned to Vincent. "You don't need to arrange help for me. I'm perfectly capable." "Of course you are," he interrupted gently. "But even the most capable people need assistance sometimes. Besides, Samuel really does need the work, and you could use the help while you're healing." Tessa studied him, trying to discern his motives. Her experience with men in Boston had taught her to be wary of offered help, which often came with expectations. But there was nothing but genuine concern in Vincent's blue eyes. "All right," she conceded, "but only until my arm heals." Vincent smiled, and again Tessa felt that curious flutter in her chest. "Agreed. Now, may I escort you back to your store or perhaps to get some dinner? You must be hungry after such a day." Tessa realized she hadn't eaten since early morning. "Dinner would be welcome, but I should reopen the store first." "The store can wait," Vincent said. "The whole town knows what happened this morning. No one will begrudge you taking the rest of the day to recover." Tessa hesitated, then nodded. "Very well." "Where does one get a decent meal in Pinos Altos?" "Mrs. Whittaker's boarding house serves the best food in town," Vincent said, offering his arm again. "And she always has a table for the town marshal." The boarding house was a large, two-story building with a wide porch and cheerful curtains in the windows. Inside, the dining room was already filling with boarders and townsfolk who preferred Mrs. Whittaker's cooking to their own. The motherly proprietress bustled over when they entered. "Marshal Quinn, and this must be Miss Donovan, heard all about your terrible morning, you poor dear. Come, I've kept a table by the window." She led them to a small table set with clean linen and simple but elegant tableware. "Now sit, both of you. I've got a fresh pot roast just out of the oven." Once they were seated, Tessa found herself relaxing for the first time since the gunfight. The dining room was warm and comfortable, filled with the appetizing smells of home cooking and the gentle hum of conversation. "Tell me about yourself, Tessa," Vincent said as Mrs. Whittaker poured them each a cup of coffee. "What brings a Boston lady to a mining town in New Mexico territory?" Tessa sipped her coffee, considering her answer. "Freedom," she said finally. "In Boston, my life was prescribed. As a woman of 26 with no husband, I was becoming an object of pity. There were constant attempts to match me with suitable gentlemen, none of whom seemed interested in my opinions or ambitions." "And you had ambitions beyond marriage." Vincent's tone held no judgment, only curiosity. "I wanted to run my own business, make my own decisions," Tessa explained. "When Uncle William died and left me the store, it seemed like Providence." She smiled wryly. "Of course I didn't expect to be shot at within my first week," Vincent laughed. "No, I imagine not. But you handled yourself well. Most newcomers would be on the next stage out after such an experience." "Are you suggesting I should leave?" Tessa challenged, raising an eyebrow. "Not at all," Vincent assured her quickly. "In fact, I'm rather hoping you'll stay." The warmth in his eyes as he said it made Tessa's cheeks flush, and she was saved from responding by the arrival of their dinner. Mrs. Whittaker served them generous portions of pot roast, potatoes, and fresh bread, all of which were indeed delicious. As they ate, Vincent told her about Pinos Altos, how it had boomed after the discovery of gold in 1860, but had nearly become a ghost town during the Civil War when Confederate forces occupied the region, and most miners fled. The discovery of silver had brought renewed prosperity, and now the town was growing again. "What about you?" Tessa asked. "You mentioned you came looking for silver but found a badge instead." Vincent's expression grew more serious. "I was a Texas Ranger before coming here. Spent years chasing outlaws across the border and back. Got tired of the killing, the endless pursuit, wanted something different. So you became a town marshal. That doesn't seem so different," Tessa observed. "It is, though," Vincent insisted. "Here I'm building something, protecting a community, not just hunting men down. Most days it's peaceful work, settling disputes, keeping order, helping folks." He smiled slightly. "Of course, days like today are the exception." "And your family?" Tessa asked. "Are they still in Texas?" A shadow passed over Vincent's face. "Lost my parents to fever when I was young, had a brother but he was killed during the war. Haven't had much in the way of family since then." "I'm sorry," Tessa said softly, understanding the loneliness he described all too well. Her own parents had died in a carriage accident when she was 16, leaving her in the care of a distant aunt who had viewed her primarily as a burden to be married off as quickly as possible. "What about you?" Any family besides your late uncle? Vincent asked. An aunt in Boston who is undoubtedly scandalized by my move west, and a cousin in Philadelphia whom I write to occasionally, Tessa replied. Uncle William was my father's brother. He left Boston years ago seeking adventure. My father always said William was the wild one. And it seems you've inherited that streak, Vincent observed with a smile. Tessa laughed. Perhaps I have. My aunt certainly thinks so. As they finished their meal, Tessa became aware of curious glances from other diners. I believe we're the subject of some speculation, she murmured. Vincent followed her gaze and chuckled. Small towns. By tomorrow, half the population will be convinced we're engaged. That seems premature, considering we only met this morning, Tessa said, trying to sound light despite the unexpected flutter in her stomach at the word engaged. People like a good story, Vincent said with a shrug. And in their defense, it's not every day their marshal rescues a beautiful newcomer from gunfire. Tessa felt her cheeks warm at the casual compliment. Before she could respond, Mrs. Whittaker appeared with apple pie, insisting they try it despite their protests that they were too full. By the time they finished, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the main street as Vincent walked Tessa back to her store. Your rooms are above the shop. He asked as they reached the building. Tessa nodded. Yes, Uncle William had a small apartment up there. It's simple but comfortable. Vincent hesitated at the door. Will you be all right tonight? Your arm? I'll manage, she assured him. The laudanum will help if the pain is too bad. Vincent nodded, though he still looked concerned. I'll send Samuel over first thing in the morning, and I'll check on you myself when I make my rounds. Thank you, Vincent, for everything today. He smiled, and in the fading light, his blue eyes seemed to hold a warmth meant only for her. My pleasure, Tessa. Sleep well. As she watched him walk away, Tessa felt a curious mixture of emotions, gratitude, certainly, but also something else, something that made her heart beat a little faster despite the exhaustion of the day. It was too soon to name it, she told herself as she climbed the stairs to her small apartment. Too soon and too foolish to be feeling this way about a man she'd just met, no matter how heroic his actions or how kind his eyes. And yet, as she prepared for bed, wincing as she changed her clothes with one hand, Tessa found herself looking forward to seeing Vincent Quinn again in the morning. True to his word, Vincent sent Samuel Jenkins to the general store at first light the next morning. The boy was 17, gangly but strong, with an earnest face and a polite manner that immediately put Tessa at ease. He proved to be a quick learner, eager to help, and by midday, Tessa was grateful for his assistance as customers streamed in, many clearly there to get a glimpse of the woman who had survived the Chandler gang's raid. Vincent stopped by at noon, looking tired but pleased to find Tessa managing well with Samuel's help. The boy working out all right, he asked, watching as Samuel expertly weighed coffee beans for Mrs. Henderson. Wonderfully, Tessa confirmed. I might have to keep him on even after my arm heals. Vincent smiled. He'd like that. The boy's got ambitions beyond being a ranch hand like his father. And the Chandlers? Tessa asked, lowering her voice. Any sign of the ones who escaped? Vincent's expression darkened. No, but we've sent word to neighboring towns to be on the lookout. The 3 we captured aren't talking, but they'll be transported to Santa Fe for trial next week. He hesitated, then added, I've been meaning to ask, do you have a gun? Tessa blinked in surprise. No, I never needed one in Boston. This isn't Boston, Vincent said gently. Most women out here carry at least a small derringer, especially those living alone. Are you suggesting I'm still in danger? Tessa asked, a flicker of fear stirring within her. Vincent shook his head quickly. No, not specifically, but it's wise to be prepared in the territories. I could show you how to use one if you'd like. Tessa considered the offer. The idea of handling a firearm was foreign to her, but yesterday's events had demonstrated that danger could find her even in this small town. I suppose that would be prudent, she agreed. Relief crossed Vincent's face. Good, I have a Smith & Wesson that would suit you. Small but reliable. Are you free on Sunday? We could ride out beyond town, find a quiet place to practice. The suggestion of spending an entire day in Vincent's company sent an unexpected thrill through Tessa. Sunday would be fine. The store's closed anyway. I'll come by around 10 then. His smile warmed his entire face, making him look younger, almost boyish despite the badge pinned to his vest. And maybe bring a picnic lunch if that suits you. That sounds lovely, Tessa replied, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest that seemed to accompany Vincent's smiles. The rest of the week passed in a blur of activity. With Samuel's help, Tessa was able to manage the store despite her injured arm, which was healing well under Doc Miller's care. Vincent stopped by daily, sometimes just for a moment during his rounds, other times lingering to talk when the store was quiet. Each visit left Tessa more intrigued by the marshal, whose quiet strength and thoughtfulness set him apart from any man she'd known in Boston. By Sunday morning, Tessa found herself watching the clock, anticipation building as 10 o'clock approached. She had dressed carefully in a practical riding skirt and jacket, her hair pinned up under a simple hat. When a knock sounded at the door precisely at 10, she took a deep breath to calm her racing heart before answering. Vincent stood on the porch, looking different out of his marshal's attire. He wore a blue shirt under a leather vest with worn jeans and boots that had seen many miles. Without his badge, he could have been any cowboy or rancher, except for the quiet authority in his bearing. "Good morning," he greeted, his eyes taking in her outfit with approval. "Ready for your first shooting lesson?" Tessa nodded, locking the door behind her. Outside, 2 horses waited, Vincent's bay gelding and a gentle-looking dun mare. "Hope you don't mind riding," Vincent said, helping her mount despite her protests that she was perfectly capable. "Thought it would be nice to show you a bit of the country." The day was perfect for riding, clear and sunny with a light breeze that carried the scent of sage and pine from the mountains. Vincent led them out of town on a trail that followed Bear Creek, the terrain gradually changing from desert scrub to pine forest as they gained elevation. "It's beautiful," Tessa marveled, breathing deeply of the clear mountain air. "So different from Boston." "Different from Texas, too," Vincent said. "That's what I love about this territory, the variety, desert, mountains, forests, all within a day's ride." After about an hour, they reached a small meadow beside a bend in the creek, sheltered by tall pines and offering a view of the mountains beyond. Vincent dismounted and helped Tessa from her horse, his hands lingering briefly at her waist. "This should be perfect," he said, tying the horses where they could graze. "Private enough that we won't disturb anyone, but open enough for safe shooting practice." From his saddlebag, Vincent produced a small revolver, a Smith & Wesson Model 2, he explained, chambered for .32 caliber cartridges. It was nickel-plated with pearl grips, delicate-looking but deadly. "It's beautiful," Tessa said, surprised at the craftsmanship of the weapon. "Functional beauty," Vincent agreed, showing her how to hold it properly. "Now, the first rule of firearms is to never point it at anything you don't intend to shoot. The second is to always check if it's loaded." He demonstrated how to check the cylinder, then carefully placed the unloaded gun in her hands. Tessa was surprised by its weight, heavier than it looked despite its small size. "How does it feel?" Vincent asked, standing close beside her. "Strange," Tessa admitted. "Powerful but frightening too." Vincent nodded approvingly. "That's a good way to feel about it. A gun should never become so familiar that you forget its purpose." He spent the next hour patiently teaching her how to load, aim, and fire the revolver. Tessa was a quick student, though her first few shots went wild. Vincent stood behind her, adjusting her stance and guiding her arms, his body warm against her back. The closeness was distracting, but Tessa forced herself to focus on his instructions. By the time they broke for lunch, Tessa was consistently hitting the pine cone target Vincent had set up on a fallen log. Her arm ached from the recoil, but there was a satisfaction in mastering this new skill that surprised her. "You're a natural," Vincent praised as he spread a blanket on the grass and unpacked the picnic basket he'd brought. "Most beginners can't hit anything on their first day." "I had a good teacher," Tessa replied, sitting down on the blanket and removing her hat. She ran a hand through her hair, loosening pins that had come askew during their practice. Vincent paused in unpacking the food, watching her with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. "You look different with your hair down," he said softly. "Younger, less proper." Tessa suggested with a smile. "I was going to say constrained," Vincent admitted, returning her smile, "but yes, less proper. It suits you." The picnic was simple but delicious: cold chicken, fresh bread, cheese, and apples, with a jar of lemonade to wash it down. They ate in companionable conversation, Tessa telling Vincent more about her life in Boston, and Vincent sharing stories of his days as a Texas Ranger. "Is that how you got that scar?" Tessa asked, gesturing to the thin white line that cut through his right eyebrow. Vincent touched it reflexively. No, that's from when I was a boy. Fell out of a barn loft showing off for my brother." He smiled at the memory. "The one on my shoulder, though, that was courtesy of a cattle rustler who objected to being arrested. You have a scar on your shoulder." Tessa asked, then immediately blushed at the impropriety of the question. Vincent chuckled at her embarrassment. "Knife wound, healed clean but left its mark." He rolled his left shoulder demonstratively. "I've been lucky, though. Many rangers didn't live long enough to collect scars." After they finished eating, Vincent suggested they rest a while before resuming practice. Tessa leaned back on her elbows, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the peaceful sounds of the forest. Vincent stretched out beside her, his hat tipped over his face to shield his eyes. "Thank you for today," Tessa said after a comfortable silence. "Not just the shooting lesson, but for getting me out of town. I didn't realize how much I needed it." Vincent lifted his hat to look at her. "Running a store is demanding work. Everyone needs a day away now and then." "Is that why you brought me here? Because you thought I needed a break?" Vincent sat up, his expression suddenly serious. "Partly, but mostly because I wanted to spend time with you, Tessa, away from curious eyes and town gossip." His directness surprised her. In Boston, men approached courtship with carefully coded language and proper chaperoning. Vincent's honesty was refreshing but also unnerving in its clarity. "And why is that, Marshal Quinn?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light despite the sudden racing of her heart. "Because from the moment I pulled you behind that water trough, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you," he admitted. "Your courage, your determination, the way you've thrown yourself into making a new life here, it's remarkable. You're remarkable." Tessa felt her cheeks flush with pleasure at his words. "I think you give me too much credit. I was terrified during that gunfight." "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Vincent said, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's acting despite it. And you, Tessa Donovan, are one of the bravest women I've ever met." The touch of his fingers against her cheek sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with fear. They were alone, far from the prying eyes of town, and the look in Vincent's eyes made it clear what he was thinking. "Vincent," she began, uncertain what she wanted to say. A warning, an invitation. Before she could decide, a twig snapped in the forest behind them. Vincent was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the revolver at his hip. Tessa scrambled up beside him, her heart pounding. "Get behind me," Vincent ordered quietly, drawing his gun. For a tense moment they stood frozen, listening to the forest sounds. Then a deer emerged from the trees, regarding them with liquid brown eyes before bounding away across the meadow. Vincent exhaled, holstering his weapon. "Just a deer." Tessa laughed shakily, the tension broken. I know," Vincent said. "So did I." The moment between them had passed, but something had shifted, an acknowledgement of feelings that could no longer be ignored. They packed up the picnic in companionable silence, and Vincent suggested they practice a bit more before heading back to town. This time, when he stood behind her to adjust her aim, Tessa was acutely aware of his nearness, of the strength in his arms as they encircled her, of his breath warm against her ear. When she successfully hit the target 3 times in succession, she turned to him with a triumphant smile, finding his face just inches from hers. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Vincent slowly, deliberately, closed the distance between them and kissed her. His lips were warm and gentle against hers, the kiss a question more than a demand. Tessa answered by stepping closer, her free hand rising to rest against his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. When they finally broke apart, Vincent's blue eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of regret or alarm. Tessa offered him a shy smile instead. "I've wanted to do that since the day we met," Vincent confessed, his voice husky. "Even with bullets flying around us," Tessa teased. "Especially then," he admitted with a grin. "There's something about a woman who can keep her wits about her in a gunfight that's very attractive." Tessa laughed, the sound carrying across the meadow. "I'm fairly certain I wasn't very witty at the time, mostly just terrified and grateful." "Grateful enough to let me call on you properly?" Vincent asked, suddenly serious again. "Because I'd very much like to court you, Tessa Donovan, if you're amenable." Tessa considered him this man who had saved her life, tended her wound, taught her to shoot, and now stood before her with his heart in his eyes. She had come west seeking independence, not romance, and yet, "I would be very amenable to that, Vincent Quinn," she answered softly. His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds, transforming his face with joy. He leaned down to kiss her again, more confidently this time, his arms encircling her waist to draw her closer. The ride back to Pinos Altos was filled with comfortable conversation and stolen glances, the new understanding between them adding a sweet undercurrent to every word and look. As they approached town, however, Vincent grew more serious. "People will talk," he warned her. "Small towns always do." Tessa straightened in her saddle. "Let them. I didn't leave Boston's propriety behind just to bow to frontier gossip." Vincent laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "That's my girl," he said, his eyes warm with admiration. "Still, I'd like to do this properly, court you as you deserve to be courted." "And what does proper courtship look like in Pinos Altos?" Tessa asked, curious. "Escorting you to church socials, calling on you in the evenings, taking you to dinner at Mrs. Whittaker's," Vincent listed. "Nothing so formal as Boston, I imagine, but with respect nonetheless." "That sounds lovely," Tessa said, touched by his thoughtfulness. As they rode down the main street, Tessa was aware of curious glances from townspeople out for Sunday strolls. Vincent seemed unconcerned, tipping his hat to those who greeted them but otherwise focused on seeing Tessa safely home. At her door, he helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. "I'll return the mare to the livery for you," he offered, taking the reins. "Thank you for today," Tessa said. "All of it." Vincent's eyes softened. "My pleasure, Miss Donovan." He glanced around, noting several townspeople watching them with undisguised interest, then leaned closer to whisper, "I'd very much like to kiss you again, but I suspect it would be the talk of the town by supper." Tessa smiled, emboldened by the day's events. "I suspect it already will be, Marshal Quinn." With that, she stretched up on tiptoe and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek before slipping inside her store, closing the door on his surprised and delighted expression. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Tessa's life. True to his word, Vincent courted her properly, escorting her to church on Sundays, calling on her in the evenings, and taking her to dinner at Mrs. Whittaker's at least once a week. The townsfolk quickly accepted their courtship, some even claiming they had predicted it from the first day. Samuel Jenkins continued to work at the store even after Tessa's arm fully healed, proving himself so valuable that she offered him a permanent position. With his help, the store flourished, becoming a gathering place for the community and turning a tidy profit that allowed Tessa to expand her inventory. Vincent, too, thrived in his role as marshal. The capture of 3 of the Chandler gang enhanced his reputation, and law and order prevailed in Pinos Altos. There were still occasional incidents, minors brawling after payday, disputes over claims, petty thefts, but nothing that approached the danger of that first week. As summer turned to fall, Vincent began taking Tessa on longer rides into the surrounding countryside on her days off. They explored hidden valleys, picnicked beside mountain streams, and watched the aspens turn golden against the blue sky. On these excursions, away from prying eyes, they could be more open with their affections, sharing kisses and embraces that grew increasingly difficult to end. It was on one such ride, as they sat beside a small waterfall watching the late afternoon light play through the changing leaves, that Vincent turned to Tessa with unusual seriousness. "I've been offered a position," he said, taking her hand in his. U.S. Marshal for the Southern District of New Mexico Territory. Tessa felt a cold flutter of fear. That would mean leaving Pinos Altos. Headquarters would be in Las Cruces, Vincent confirmed. "It's a considerable promotion, more responsibility, better pay." He hesitated, watching her face. "But I won't take it if it means losing you, Tessa." Tessa's mind raced. She had built a life here, established her store, made friends. The thought of starting over again was daunting, and yet, "What if you didn't have to lose me?" she asked carefully. Hope flared in Vincent's eyes. "You'd consider coming with me?" "I would consider it," Tessa said slowly, "if I were asked properly." Understanding dawned on Vincent's face, followed by a smile that took her breath away. He shifted to kneel before her on the rocky bank, still holding her hand in his. "Tessa Donovan," he began, his voice husky with emotion. "From the moment I pulled you to safety in that gunfight, something in me knew you were special. These past months have only confirmed what my heart suspected then, that you are the bravest, most remarkable woman I've ever known, and the only one I want by my side for the rest of my days." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears blurred Tessa's vision as Vincent opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Vincent Quinn, I will marry you." His hands trembled slightly as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms for a kiss that left them both breathless. When they finally broke apart, Tessa rested her forehead against his, a thought occurring to her. "My store, Samuel, has been managing wonderfully when you're not there," Vincent reminded her. "And Las Cruces is growing rapidly. There might be opportunity for a new general store there if you wanted. Or I could sell the Pinos Altos store to Samuel," Tessa mused. "He knows it as well as I do now, and he's been saving to start his own business someday." Vincent smiled. "See, already solving problems together. That's why we make such a good team." The ride back to town was filled with plans and dreams for their future together. They agreed to announce their engagement at church the following Sunday and to marry before leaving for Las Cruces. Tessa would speak to Samuel about taking over the store, and Vincent would begin arrangements for his new position. The town's reaction to their engagement was overwhelmingly positive. Mrs. Whittaker immediately offered to host the wedding reception at her boarding house, and the ladies of the church sewing circle volunteered to help Tessa with her wedding dress. Even Samuel, who might have been disappointed at losing his employer, was excited by the prospect of taking over the store, especially when Tessa proposed a gradual buyout plan that would allow him to become owner while continuing to send her payments. The wedding was set for November, giving them just enough time to make all necessary arrangements. As the day approached, Tessa found herself reflecting on the extraordinary turn her life had taken since arriving in Pinos Altos. She had come seeking independence and a fresh start, never imagining she would find love in the process. Yet as she stood before the mirror on her wedding day, wearing a simple but elegant ivory gown with lace trim, she couldn't imagine any other path that would have brought her such happiness. The ceremony was held in the small white church on the hill above town. Nearly everyone in Pinos Altos attended, filling the pews and spilling out onto the steps. Vincent, handsome in a new black suit, waited for her at the altar with such love in his eyes that Tessa's heart seemed too full to contain her joy. Their vows were simple and heartfelt, promising to love and cherish each other through all the adventures and challenges that lay ahead. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent's kiss was tender but held a promise that made Tessa blush beneath her veil. The reception at Mrs. Whittaker's boarding house lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and more food than the entire town could possibly eat. As darkness fell, lanterns were lit in the garden, casting a warm glow over the celebrating guests. "Happy Mrs. Quinn," Vincent murmured in her ear as they shared a quiet moment on the porch, away from the festivities. "Incredibly so, Marshal Quinn," Tessa replied, leaning into his embrace. Though I'm still getting used to my new name. You have a lifetime to practice, he assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. 3 days later, they boarded the stagecoach for Las Cruces, Tessa's few belongings packed in trunks, the store officially transferred to Samuel's eager hands. The entire town turned out to see them off, showering them with rice and good wishes. As the stagecoach pulled away, Tessa looked back at the town that had changed her life in so many unexpected ways. "I'll miss it," she admitted, squeezing Vincent's hand. "We'll visit," he promised. "But we have new adventures waiting for us, Tessa. A new home, new challenges, and someday, God willing, a family of our own." The thought of children, little boys with Vincent's blue eyes or girls with his courage and determination, filled Tessa with a warm glow of anticipation. "I look forward to every minute of it," she said, resting her head on his shoulder as the stagecoach rumbled south. 2 years later, Vincent stood on the porch of their Las Cruces home, watching as Tessa rocked their infant son in the swing he had built when she first told him she was expecting. The baby William Vincent Quinn, named for Tessa's uncle, and his father slept peacefully against her breast, his tiny hand curled around her finger. Vincent's position as U.S. Marshal had proven challenging but rewarding, bringing stability to a region that had long suffered from lawlessness. Tessa had indeed opened a new general store, which had quickly become as successful as her Pinos Altos establishment. Now, with young William's arrival, their happiness seemed complete. "What are you thinking about, looking at us like that?" Tessa asked, glancing up to find Vincent watching them with a tender expression. "Just counting my blessings," he replied, moving to sit beside her on the swing. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, marveling at how perfectly she and their son fit against him. "Do you ever think about that day?" "The gunfight?" Tessa smiled, knowing exactly which day he meant. "Sometimes it seems like another lifetime now, if the Chandlers hadn't chosen that day to raid the bank." Vincent mused. "Then some other day would have brought us together," Tessa said with certainty. "I believe we were meant to find each other, Vincent, whether behind a water trough during a gunfight or across a crowded church social." Vincent pressed a kiss to her temple, then gently touched their sleeping son's downy head. "I think you're right, but I'm grateful it happened the way it did. That moment when I saw you in danger, when I ran to you without thinking, it changed everything." "For both of us," Tessa agreed softly. As the sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they sat together on the porch swing, a family forged in the crucible of danger but bound by love, their future stretching before them as vast and promising as the New Mexico horizon.